Hello, I'm Bill McCartney, and this is the fourth and final race of the AAMI Sydney Challenge for 18-foot skiffs. Phil Barnett had a horror day yesterday, Warwick Rooklyn. Can he recover and win the event today?
Well, Phil Barnett's going to try and withstand the pressure from the toughest man in the business, and that's Rob Brown. So he needs it today to wrap up the series, or it goes on to the next leg.
They're getting ready for a start to race 4.
And the breeze, very soft from the southeast at the start. We have head cam on board Prima Drinks.
Let's go, we're racing.
Up ahead, Alabache.
Good start, Dave, good start.
And Greg Homan giving his skipper a pat on the back. The helmet actually being worn by the sheet hand Greg Homan. And Tasmania, naturally different, got a crewman over the side. Young Mark Lonergan went for a swim, fell off the side of the boat, and they've had to stop and pick him up. So Tasmania naturally different in strife early. Out of the blocks, Alabache looking good. Bank of New Zealand looking particularly good.
Yes, the bank has got a bit of new breeze coming down from Rose Bay across the harbour and has got it before the other competitors and has sailed away where the others are still caught in that light breeze around the hill there.
It appeared to me as though someone on board Alabache was pumping the mainsail then, Warwick. That's most unusual, hard on the breeze.
Yes, I'm not really sure the reason for all of that, but very close between Xerox and Prudential. And Prudential wants to serve it up to Phil Barnett today. He wants to keep the series alive and take it on to Perth. Bank of New Zealand sailing well. This flat water will be suiting this boat. It's a little bit fuller in the hull design and doesn't like the choppy conditions, and so conditions are good for the Bank of New Zealand, and they're in good breeze and using everything they've got to good advantage.
And way out to the right there, looking as though Bank of New Zealand is doing extremely well. Skilled engineering, Andrew DeVola again good out of the blocks and right up there with them at this early stage. But here's the dogfight that really counts for most in this race between Phil Barnett and Rob Brown. Phil Barnett has to beat Rob Brown in this race. He has to get someone in between them as well, so he's got it all to do. Early days yet. Prima in the background. Now Bank of New Zealand changes directions, and she is currently leading this race with Alabache very close behind her. And I suspect that with Alabache battling it out for second and third, we'll find skilled engineering.
Yes, and Bank of New Zealand tacked then to cover Alabache and to cross the entire fleet. And they're in good breeze and lifting well. We can see the direction difference between the two boats. That meant that Bank of New Zealand had a bit different slant on the breeze and was able to get closer to the mark.
Bank of New Zealand leading, Alabache close behind her, second going out to the right. The battle between Prudential and Xerox, the main contenders in the AAMI Sydney Challenge, coming up towards Nelson Park, changing directions now, going through attack, and at the moment Rob Brown has the controlling position. They started back there near Taylor's Bay, up to the top mark around Shark Island, back down to Taylor's Bay, back up through the start-finish line. That's one of 2 laps that they'll do. They're currently making their way up towards the top mark for the first time, around about 10% of the way through this race.
Yes, and a little battle developing between Bank of New Zealand and Alabache. Another battle between Xerox and Prudential. Alabache going for the tack. And the jib momentarily caught there.
These pictures coming from Shark Island now. Bank of New Zealand heading straight for us. Now a clear leader. Alabache crosses behind second, although skilled engineering is still very much amongst this group, and skilled engineering right up there, in fact, with Bank of New Zealand as she changes directions now to get up around Shark Island and round that top mark.
Yes, and the conditions very tricky on this first beat. The breeze is changing direction all the time, and Tasmania, naturally different, is right up there with the front runners and doing a very good job. Bank of New Zealand still has the initiative, is just a slight leader, tacking back, trying to work their way up to the top mark for the first time, working the wind shifts and doing a fine job at it too.
Beautiful balance from Charlie Diekman and Cameron McDonald coming through that tack. The skiff stayed perfectly flat in the water, and now Alabache coming right in behind Bank of New Zealand, getting different breeze, being forced to drop down directly in behind Bank of New Zealand, now picking up the disturbed air off the sails of Bank of New Zealand and slipping back ever so slightly.
Xerox and Prudential are really lacking pressure. In other words, they haven't got enough sail for the amount of wind there is, and they're having to send one of the crew members in off the end of the wing all the time. can see the forward hand there balancing the boat by moving in and out. Very critical that these boats stay upright all the time.
And skilled engineering right there with Bank of New Zealand at the top mark for the first time. Andrew Davola having a ripper of a race, battling it out with Bank of New Zealand in the contest for first and second.
Skilled engineering does a much better set of the spinnaker than Bank of New Zealand, and will capitalise on that and will start to sail away from the bank. Prudential and Ella Bachet very close. Ella Bachet slipped back there, and Prudential has done a good job at the second part of that windward beat to slip into third place. And a good set on Prudential. Ella Bachet a little bit slow.
Skilled engineering having their race of the national circuit so far. Andrew Davola, one of the great characters, and also, as we can see, a very good sailor indeed, doing well, leading this race. Back at the top mark, Prima Drinks is around. Prima Drinks leads Tip Top Wide High Five and Tasmania Naturally Different, and here they are, setting the spinnaker. And that's the action from on board Prima Drinks as they get that spinnaker set and head off down the track in pursuit of these vehicles. Now, Xerox out on the left has come round the eastern side of Shark Island. They've taken a different course to Skilled Engineering and Bank of New Zealand in an effort to find different breeze and try and make up some time, because they certainly went round that top mark back in 5th position and in trouble, whereas Andrew Davola has piloted Skilled Engineering up into the lead.
Phil Reid, the forward hand on Skilled Engineering, working the spinnaker hard. He's pulling that rope in and out. There's a lot of weight on that. And Jeremy Hampshire, the sheet hand, the guy in the centre, will be calling the tactics to Andrew Davola, feeding the information. Xerox now going for a jibe, changing direction. They've taken a gamble by going the other side of Shark Island. Will it pay off?
Let's go. Head back.
Now coming back to cross with Prudential in third, and these guys in first and second. Bank of New Zealand second. Narrowly from Skilled Engineering, leading and holding their ground, coming down off the breeze. Andrew Davola sailing extremely well under pressure. And they're now getting down towards the bottom end of the course, just crossing in front of Bradley's Head at the moment, going for the spinnaker drop.
Bank of New Zealand goes for the drop a little bit earlier. Starting to pull the spinnaker around what we call the windward side, the right-hand side of the boat, to gather it all up and put it in the bag on the deck. Skilled Engineering, and nice drop by them. They've got to just get it in a little bit further. A lot of pressure coming from Bank of New Zealand, but they hold them out, and round the mark in first place is Skilled Engineering. Bank of New Zealand has to go down below Skilled. So good work from the boys on board Skilled as they do the final clearing up.
And rounding third, having got over the top of Prudential now, took a different direction, coming down to the bottom mark, and Xerox not only up into third position, but let me say hot on the tail of first and second. So Phil Barnett now throws down the gauntlet. If he can get one of those skiffs between himself and Prudential, then he can still win the AAMI Sydney Challenge, and thus the total national circuit, so it's still wide open. Andrew Davola and Jeremy Hampshire aboard Skilled Engineering, narrowly leading this race. They've been around the bottom mark, that's them in blue, with the Bank of New Zealand. Behind them in white is Xerox. Just coming around the bottom mark in red is Prudential, and coming down the back straight in orange is Prima Drinks. And we're on board Prima Drinks now.
I said we could have gone a bit further.
Just saying they could have gone a little bit further on the other tack before they jibed. Talking about the tactics for their downwind leg.
Bank of New Zealand battling it out with Prima Drinks. Scott Ramsden consulting with his crew, Cameron McDonald and Charlie Diekman. And Charlie Diekman, you sailed with Charlie a lot, Warwick. In fact, he was with you last year, and they tell me he's great on the water at picking the breeze.
Yes, well, he's been a skipper himself. He was right up there in the 12-foot skiffs and narrowly missed out on winning the national titles. So he's a very experienced campaigner and a great man to have on board.
Bank of New Zealand complete their tack, now coming across on port tack. They have no right-of-way. Skilled Engineering has right-of-way. Xerox is there as well. Looks as though Xerox has now moved up into second position.
Back on the final windward beat for the AAMI Challenge. We have Xerox moved into second position. Prudential needs to get a little bit closer to Xerox to keep their hopes of winning the challenge and their hopes of keeping the whole Grand Prix circuit alive.
But Skilled Engineering still going just great. Look at the angle they've got there compared to Xerox. Skilled Engineering saying about 5-6 degrees higher than Xerox in different breeze, doing very nicely. Now Rob Brown puts Prudential into a direction change, hoping to pick up some better breeze, hoping to get right next to Xerox, because if she can stay next to Xerox, she'll win the AAMI Sydney Challenge and be right back in there with the national circuit.
Prudential has got good pressure there, but we can see the breeze just dying away, so Dave Slennett has to run in. Chris Harmson has to get in off the end of the wing. So the breeze is moving up and down a lot.
Skiffs out to the right have better pressure. Although suddenly now on board Skilled it dies, and that's the problem they've got all the time. And what they have to do when it stops like that is make sure that that wing doesn't dip in the water, so the crews have to be very alert. Now they get a gust on board Skilled.
And we can see the main sheet being eased. A little bit of trouble. Phil Reid has to flick the jib off. Too much pressure there. They get the boat settled down, all out in the end of the wings again, and get it up to top speed. They have to constantly change the control lines to change the depth and shape of the sail according to the wind strength. When the breeze lightens, they have to deepen the sails to get more pressure, and when the breeze increases, they have to flatten the sails to make the air in the sails exhaust quicker.
Bank of New Zealand currently clinging to second position. Leading and leading comprehensively, doing very nicely indeed is Skilled Engineering, and Andrew DeVola under tremendous pressure now. We're getting up towards the top end of the course. He doesn't have a big lead, but he's just sailing perfectly. They haven't yet been able to really put the pressure on him and force a mistake.
And they say the hardest one to win is your first one, and this is going to be, if he can stay there, this will be the first major race that Andrew DeVola has ever won, and I think we haven't seen the best of him yet.
Scott Ramsden, one of the most agile and fluent members of an 18-foot skiff crew that I've ever seen. You saw him there coming through on that tack, and so much agility and balance. And here we go, Prudential now has slipped back up ahead of Xerox, so Prudential now back in control of this race insofar as Xerox is concerned, and in that position she's going to win the AAMI Sydney Challenge and remain in contention on the national circuit in a big way.
When we talk about agility and speed, the agility part in these sort of conditions is so important. You can't upset the boats when you turn them around. It's got to be smooth, it's got to be fluent, and they've got to keep the boats up to top speed all the time.
The different angles being sailed by those skiffs tells you that they're sailing in different breeze. Prudential has got breeze coming more from the south than Xerox down below them, and thus they've been able to sail up much higher than them as they try and sail as close as possible to directly into the wind. And there we see Prudential suffering a terrible knock as the breeze changes direction on them. Skilled Engineering changes directions. Bank of New Zealand right underneath them, heading towards the top mark, now about 200 metres from it. Then they'll set their chutes and head off down the course towards the finish line.
And if Skilled Engineering can win this, it won't be through a fluke, because they've had pressure mounted on them the whole race. So far they have sustained that pressure, and they're just sailing like professionals. It's just fantastic to see a new face up there beating off the old campaigners.
Andrew DeVola has been waiting for years to get his hands on the right equipment to prove himself. Now this skiff is a few years old. The rigs are at least a season down the track, so theoretically he shouldn't be with the leaders as the boys get into a vigorous spinnaker set. Phil Reid jumping out on the wing.
Phil Reid is so quick in the boat. He's got so much energy, he's so fit. He just whips that spinnaker to the top of the mast, and Bank of New Zealand, a little bit of a muff up there, not through their own fault, but just caught up with the jib, and that's helped Skilled Engineering just get away just that tiny little bit.
Okay.
There's the lead. No more than 10 seconds in it, maybe 15 at the most, but Skilled Engineering has a very big, powerful spinnaker, and Scott Ramsden will have to pull one out of the bag if he's going to catch up to him and take over in first. They're now around about 3 or 4 minutes away from the finish line, and at this stage Skilled Engineering leads.
And that will be the longest 3 or 4 minutes in Andrew DeVola's life. As they jibe now, come a mount pressure, they have right of way if it comes to a collision course. Bank of New Zealand will have to give right of way and go around the back of Skilled Engineering. Bank of New Zealand jibes inside them, trying to get into a tactical position where they can take Skilled's breeze, but Skilled Engineering with all three guys out the end of the wing, fully pressured up at full speed.
hooked into some beautiful breeze on Skilled as Ella Bachet still on her way up to the top mark. They found an horrendous hole in the breeze back down there, and they're way back now in 7th position. But Scott Ramsden and the crew on Bank of New Zealand doing everything to try and get up to Skilled Engineering. Ella Bachet struggling.
Crunch time for Andrew Davola. The pressure is mounting. Scott Ramsden is throwing everything he's got at the boys on Skilled Engineering. And as they pass the spectator boat there with lots of people watching them, Andrew Davola's heart will be jumping out through his chest.
He is indeed one of the most likeable characters in the business, and let's hope he can hang in there. Prima Drinks around the top mark for the last time. Tasmania Naturally Different right with them, and of course Tip Top Wide High Five out to the left also with that group. They now head down towards the bottom end of the course, currently occupying 6th, 7th and 8th positions, as Ella Bachet back in 9th, would you believe, after their fantastic performances this season. Ella Bachet about to round the top mark on board Prima Drinks. Clean up going on with Greg Homan, and it's his job to call the angle of the jibe as they get down towards Point Piper on their left. They're around about 500 metres behind these lead skiffs now.
Bank of New Zealand is slipping across over the top of Skilled Engineering. And I think Rob Brown has fallen into a big hole further down the track, and he won't be liking that, I don't think.
Now possibly Xerox out to the left, and Prudential's found a hole in the breeze, and Xerox looks to be, we'll keep an eye on that. Xerox looks to be catching up to Prudential at this stage.
And here's another cross coming up.
Here's Prudential in the hole. And Rob Brown, not a happy boy at all, head in hands.
Slams his fist down on the deck.
Prima Drinks in much better pressure over towards Point Piper, about to make a decision about when to jibe.
You're going at 90 degrees, remember?
Talking about the angle that they actually turn through.
Ready, ready. Ready when you are.
Getting set for the jibe. Boat changing direction. Pulling on the new sheet. And that's a nice jibe. David Lamont very happy with that.
So Prima Drinks now heading down towards the finish. Here's Rob Brown, now changing directions after giving his hull a good thumping, because he found himself in a hole in the breeze. They're now changing directions to see whether or not they can find some new breeze and do a bit better. Up ahead, Skilled Engineering has gone great guns. Look at this, she's opened up on the Bank of New Zealand, so Andrew Davola clinging to his lead and looking as though he's going to get there.
And he's doing a jibe drop. He turns the boat around and then drops a spinnaker, which means he doesn't have to pull the spinnaker around the front of the jib and to the other side to drop it. So that's a lot quicker manoeuvre. So he's picked the angles absolutely perfectly. Xerox now behind Prudential. So if they stay like that, Prudential is going to win the AAMI challenge. But the exciting news is up the front with Skilled Engineering. Andrew Davola looking at his first major victory straight down the gun barrels.
Very tight between Xerox and Prudential, but here is the victory that everyone in the sport is going to enjoy tremendously. Coming up to the finish line now, it's the Skilled Engineering. There's the finish boat in the background, and these boys have sailed a faultless race. Getting down towards the bottom mark, the battle between Xerox and Prudential. It looks as though Prudential has got the AAMI challenge in the bag now, even if Xerox gets around them. But here's the bat to take the gun on board. Skilled Engineering, and through they go. And what a happy chap Andrew Davola is, giving Jeremy Hampshire a shake of the hand, and they will be very happy boys indeed.
And I've just developed goosebumps all over my arms, Bill, because I know what it's like to take out that first major victory, and I can tell you the champagne will be flowing for a long time.
So the final results of the AAMI Sydney Challenge, there they are. Prudential with a third position today. She won it, and thus on the national circuit, after 4 events, Xerox is a narrow leader from Prudential. Bank of New Zealand still there, but the big winner today was Skilled Engineering. Here's the skipper, Andrew Davola.
We've been working on our sails and our rigs pretty hard, as well as trying to put as much time in on the water as we can. Crew work in 18-footers plays a very important role. One mistake can cost you hundreds of metres against the opposition, so it's really important not to make any mistakes at all. And we did that today, and hopefully if we can keep training and stay on the ball, we can keep with it.
It's very satisfying to see one of the great triers of 18-foot skiff racing in Andrew Davola come through and score such a terrific victory out there today. The national circuit itself is wide open between Prudential and Xerox. That issue will be finally resolved when we return with the 5th leg of the national circuit during the 5th cricket test.